Hence, we start with the fourth chapter, learning Tapasya self-control. If one does not come to Krishna consciousness, he may be relieved for time being from the reactions of sinful activities. But he will again commit transgressions. Lord Parikshit Maharaj said, Kavachin nirvate bhadrat, kavachi charati tat punha prashyatam atho paratam. Srimad Bhagavatam 6.1.10. Repetitive sinning and atoning seem to be like nothing but waste of time. He gave the example of an elephant which cleanses his body through in a lake of reservoir, but as soon as he comes into shore, he takes dust and throws it all over his body and immediately becomes dirty again. Thus Parikshit Maharaj said that although one may cleanse himself in the process of atonement, if he again commits the same sinful acts, what is the use? Therefore, the second question put by Parikshit Maharaj to Sukdev Goswami is very important. How can one ultimately become free from all contamination brought about by the material modes of nature? If one cannot achieve liberation, what is the use of atonement? In answer, Sukdev Goswami said that merely counteracting karma, fruitive activities by other activities cannot bring one's miseries to final end. For example, the United Nations is attempting to establish peace in the world, but they cannot stop war. War breaks out again and again. After the First World War, statesmen and diplomats manufactured the League of Nations. Then the Second World War came, and now they have devised the United Nations. But war is still going on. The actual goal is to stop war, but that cannot be done. By one action, war is created. By another action, war is stopped for the time being. But again, the next opportunity, there is another war. The cycle of sinful activities and atonement is like that. What we actually want is to be free from suffering and war, but that does not happen. Sukdev Goswami said one kind of war causes a disturbance and another kind of war stops it for some time. But that is not the ultimate solution to the problem. Sukdev Goswami states that these troubles happen due to lack of ignorance. Avidvat adhikar avidvat means lack of knowledge. Avidat adhikar with prashyatam vimasarvanam. Real atonement is performed in knowledge. Why is there fighting and why are there miseries? Unless these why questions which is in the Vedas are called Keno Upanishad rise in our mind, one is not fulfilling the proper function of his human life. This question must arise. Why am I suffering? Where from have I come? What is the constitutional position? Where shall I go after that? Why am I put into miserable form of life? Why are these birth, death and old age and disease? How can these questions be solved? Sukdev Goswami says, Nasnat Pathyam Evanam Vidyodo Bhivanti Eva Nilkram Rajan Snehe Keshamsa Kalpate. Srimad Bhagavatam 6.1.12. If one wants to actually stop disease, life must follow a regulative principle. If a person does not follow the program given by a physician to cure his disease, he cannot be cured. Similarly, if one does not think to act wisely as Vedic knowledge prescribes, how can he stop the problems of life? Simply by atonement, there may be temporary suspension of difficulties, but they will arise again. Sukdev Goswami says that in material or sinful life, we act in ways which we are forced to commit sins and suffer as a result. This is so. And if we want to stop the cycle of suffering and victimization, we have to advance in knowledge. Ordinary people or karmis are fruitive actors who work all day and night to get some enjoyable results and then again suffer. Thus, the problem of such karmis are never solved. It is suggested, therefore, one elevate himself to the platform of knowledge as prescribed in Srimad Bhagavatam. The first necessity is tapasya or acceptance of austerity. If a doctor advises a diabetic patient not to eat but to starve for some days, although no one likes to starve, the patient must voluntarily accept starvation if he wants to be cured. This is tapasya, voluntary acceptance of miserable condition. The ability to do this is good and human life is meant for that purpose. Indeed, Vedic culture prescribes tapasya and one can see many tapasvis undergoing austerities in India. In winter, they stand in water up to their neck and meditate. Standing in water during severe cold is not very comfortable, but they voluntarily do it. In summer, they also ignite fires around them and sit around in the midst of the blazes and meditate. These are examples of severe tapasya undertaken by many ascetics in India. Some tapasya is certainly required. Without it, one cannot advance in spiritual life or knowledge. If we simply engage in animal propensities of eating, sleeping, meeting and defending, not accepting the tapasya process, human life is a failure. If one wants to become an initiated member of our Krishna consciousness society, we first of all ask him to undergo tapasya. In the Western countries especially, there is a great tapasya to give up illicit sex life, intoxication, meat eating and gambling. Although we require only these austerities, it's very difficult to observe them. In England, a wealthy aristocrat inquired from a Vaishnav godbrother, Swamiji, can you make me a Brahmana? The Swamiji replied, yes, why not? You just have to observe these 4 principles. No illicit sex, no intoxication, gambling and meat eating. Impossible, the Britisher replied. Yes, it is impossible for in Europe or in America. Self-indulgence is the way of life from the very beginning. Indian gentlemen often come to the West to learn these indulgences and they think themselves to be thus advancing. Indians are automatically taught tapasya through the Vedic culture, but they come to America to forget the culture and accept another type of life. The real fact is, however, that if one wants to advance in spiritual understanding and solve all the problems of life, he must accept this life of tapasya, austerity, and restriction. Restriction is for human beings, not for animals. We encounter restrictions daily in our common dealings. We cannot drive a car on the left or run a red light without risking apprehension by the law. If a dog, however, walks on the left side on the street or crosses against a red light, it is not punished because it is an animal. The law therefore makes distinction between human beings and animals because human beings supposedly have advanced consciousness. If we do not follow the rules and regulation, we again lapse into animalism. Apparently, propaganda is being made celebrating freedom as opposed to regulated life. But one who sees things as they are can understand that freedom from all restriction is animal life. But Sukdev Goswami recommends tapasya. If we want actual freedom from the problems of life, we have to accept a life of austerity. Bondage to material life is the only other alternative. What is tapasya? What is austerity? The first principle of austerity is brahmacharya, restricted sex life. The real meaning of brahmacharya is complete celibacy. And according to Vedic culture, in the beginning of life, one should strictly follow the regulations of brahmacharya. When he is grown up, the brahmachari can marry and become grahastha. And as a grahastha, he can have sex. But in brahmacharya life, strict celibacy is the rule. In the present age, people have become degraded for want of tapasya because they are not taught how to execute tapasvi life. Criticism for its own sake will not do. One must be effectively trained in the life of tapasya. In Vedas, it states those who execute a regulative life tapasya are brahmanas. Itat ashkaram gargi vidasnam lokat prapti se brahmana. Itat akshram gargi adivastalam lokat prapti se kripana. Everyone is dying, for one can live here permanently. For no one can live here permanently. But who dies after executing a life of tapasya is a brahmana. And who dies like a cat or dog without executing tapasya is called a kirpana. The two words are used frequently in Vedic literature, Brahmana and Kripana. Kripana means miser and Brahmana refers to a liberal, broad-minded person. Brahma Janati Brahmana. One who knows the Supreme, the Absolute Truth is a Brahmana, but one who does not know is an animal. That is the difference between animal and man. To deserve the name, one must be educated to understand the Absolute Truth. Because human life is meant for knowledge, there are schools and colleges, philosophers and scientists and mathematicians. The process of eating, sleeping, mating and defending need not be taught, for they are learned instinctively. Human life is obviously meant for more. It is meant for tapasya and knowledge. There are descriptions in the Vedas of brahmacharya, celibacy, and which characterize the beginning of life, dedicated to tapasya. Smaran kirtan kele prekshanam guha bhasanam sankalpodhya vasishya kriya nivtir evacha. Sridhar 6.1.12. To properly execute celibacy, one should not even think or even talk of sex life. Reading modern literature and newspaper which are filled with sexual material is against the principle of brahmacharya. Similarly, indulgence in sex in any way, looking at and whispering with girls, and determining or endeavoring to engage in sex life are all against the principles of brahmacharya. One executes real brahmacharya when all these activities come to a halt. By austerity, celibacy, and control in mind and senses, one can advance in pure life. Similarly, advancement can be made through charity properly directed. This is called tyaga, renunciation. If one has $1 million, he should not keep it. But as long as it is within his jurisdiction, he should spend it for Krishna consciousness, or energy is properly utilized and is directed to Krishna. As soon as one quits the body, all his monetary resources and everything else that he has collected in connection with the body is finished. For the spirit soul transmigrates to another body, and one does not know where the money which is earned in his previous body is being kept or how it is being spent. A person may leave the world declaring how the money should be spent by his sons or heirs. But even if one leaves millions of dollars in the next life, he has no claim to it. But as long as it is in one's hand, it is better to spend it for good purpose. If one spends it for bad purpose, he becomes entangled. But if he spends it for good purpose, he gets good in return. It is very clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita explains there are three kinds of charity. Charity in the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance. A person in the mode of goodness knows where charity should be given. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Samoham sarva bhuteshu am devasho astit na priya he bhajanti tum mam bhaktya mam he tu shapiham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. Those who render service to me in devotion is a friend to me, and I am always a friend to him. Bhagavad Gita 9.29. Krishna is not in want of money. He is the original proprietor of everything. Isha Vasha Idam Sarvam. Ishopanishad Mantra 1. But still he asks us for charity. For example, Krishna in the guise of Vamana, a drop Brahman, went to beg from Bali Maharaj. Even though he is Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Bhagavad Gita 5.29. Proprietor of all the planets. He nevertheless says, please give in charity to me. Why? It is in our interest, for sooner we return Krishna's money to Krishna, the better situated we will be. Of course, this may not be very pleasant to hear, but actually we are all thieves, or we have stolen God properties. If one has something is not God conscious, it is to be understood that he has stolen God's property. That is the nature of material life. If this is considered thoughtfully and if one comes to real knowledge, he will realize that if one does not understand God, whose property we are using, whatever we possess is stolen property. It's also stated in Bhagavad Gita that if one does not spend his money for yajna, sacrifice, he is understood to be a thief. Yo bhunkte sthena eva saha. Bhagavad Gita 3.12. For instance, if one earns a great deal of money but tries to hide it, avoid paying income tax, the government considers him to be a criminal. He cannot say, I have earned this money. Why shall I pay tax to the government? No, he must pay for risk punishment. Similarly, in the highest sense, everything we have is Krishna's or God. It must be utilized in accordance with his desires. We may wish to construct a building, but where do we get the stone, wood and earth that construction requires? We cannot artificially produce the wood. It is a God's property. We cannot produce the metal. We must take it from the mine, which is also God's properties. The earth and the bricks which are made from it are also God's. Simply give our labor, but that labor is also God's property. We work with our hands. They are not our hands, but God's. For when the power to use the hand is withdrawn for God, the hand becomes useless. We work with our hands, but they are not our hands, but God's. But for when the power to use the hand is withdrawn by God, the hand becomes useless. We should use this great opportunity of human life to understand all these points which are mentioned in the authoritative books of Vedic knowledge like Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami declares that real atonement necessitates thoughtfulness, sobriety and meditation. One must consider whether he is the body or whether he is transcendental to the body, and one must try to know what God is. The ideas are to be studied in Krishna consciousness. We should not be frivolous or waste time. If one wants this knowledge, he wants to practice austerity, tapasya, and the beginning of tapasya, as already explained, is brahmacharya or celibacy or restricted sex life. The pivot of material attraction is sex, not only for human society but for animal societies also. Sparrows and pigeons have sex 300 times daily, although they are very strict vegetarians, and the lion, which is not a vegetarian, has sex once a year. Spiritual life is not a question of vegetarianism, but understanding higher knowledge, which one comes from the platform of elevated knowledge, he naturally becomes a vegetarian. Pandita Samadarshana, Bhagavad Gita 5.18. One who is very learned does not distinguish between a learned scholar, a brahmana, an elephant, a cow or a dog. He is Samadarshi. His vision enables him to see them all equally. How is this? He does not see the body but the soul, the spiritual spark. He thinks here is a dog, but it also a living entity. Although by his past karma he has become a dog. This learned scholar is also a living spark, but he has taken good birth because of his past karma. When comes close to that position, he does not see the body, but the spiritual spark. He does not distinguish between one living entity and another. Actually, we do not make distinction between carnivorous and vegetarians, for the grass has life just as the cow or the lamb. A guideline, however, should be the Vedic instruction given in Isopanishad. Isha Vasham idam sarvam yat kincha jagatam jagat ten tatkena bhujanta ma grida kasya savid dhanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, has set aside his quota, and no one must accept other things, knowing very well to whom they belong. Ishwanishar Mantra 1. Since everything is a property of the Supreme Lord, one can only enjoy which is allotted to him by the Lord, and one cannot touch another's property. According to Vedic life and according to all Vedic scripture, man should live on fruits and vegetables, for his teeth are made in such a way that can be very easily eaten and digested. Although it's nature's law that no one has to live by eating other living entities, jivo snam, one must use discretion. Fruits, flower, vegetables, rice, grain, milk are made for human beings. Milk, for example, is an animal product, the blood of an animal transformed, but the cow delivers more milk than is needed by her calf because milk is intended for man. Man should simply take the milk and let the cows live, and thus following nature's law, man will be happy. Tena tattena bunjita, Nishad Mantra 1. One should take whatever God allots to him and thus live comfortably. We have to elevate our consciousness through this science of Krishna. Charity is within everyone's heart, but we do not know how to make the best use of it. Whatever we spend in terms of energy should be for Krishna, for it belongs to him. By spending for Krishna, one will never be a loser. Krishna is so kind that we offer him food, he accepts and yet leaves everything for us to eat. Simply by offering food to Krishna, we can become devotees. We do not spend an extra farthing. In a higher sense, everything belongs to Krishna, but we offer everything to Krishna. We will be elevated. This is a sublime and a proven way for advancement in pure life. Thank you so much.